Welcome to the Nerds and Friends podcast. Today we have a very special episode with artist Will Shaw. Follow him on Instagram, Will Shaw Art. We have Carey DuVal here joining us, and my man Nathan Childs joining us from the East Coast. And today we are talking about, what are we talking about, guys?
We are talking about fantasy languages.
Yes.
But so here's the fun thing. I threw this out for a completely nerdy reason of I was watching Let's Plays on YouTube of a new game that's coming out called Cult of the Lamb.
Educate the Luddite. What is a Let's Play?
Okay, so Let's Play for those of us that are over 30, because this is more of a new thing for me as well. A Let's Play is you watch somebody who has a vague semblance of a personality. I'm kidding. Most of them are very funny. Play and react to a video game. So basically, it is a consensual version of having that friend in high school who would never give you the fucking controller.
I see.
Or if you're like me and you're objectively terrible at video games, you just watch it for the story, which sometimes, if you're watching Halo 2, is disappointing. Anyway.
Ooh, ouch! We could even that's a whole different tangent. We won't go there.
Halo 2 was a fun story.
That would be
3,
offensive if he wasn't correct.
Yeah, that's true.
Offensively correct. Okay, so this game that's coming out is called Cult of the Lamb, and one of the things it does, minus it does have voice actors, but all of the dialogue is in text balloons. But while these text balloons are going on, in order to fill space and fill sound, each of the characters is mumbling kind of a gibberish language, something that's kind of like it. Technically, it's like there's a word for it. It's not diegetic language, but it's similar. But it does follow like the inflection and the tone and like the emotion of what's being said in the text bubble. But they are saying gibberish. And
so it's kind of mumbly and rambling. It's the opposite of Nathan's awesome haircut, is what you're saying.
Yes, it's not clean. It's not well defined. It's just like, and I'll go into psychological studies about this later, but like I found it fascinating. And I know that there are a couple of games that have done that to really good effect. Shadow of the Colossus, for instance, or Ico. Like there are a good chunk of like Japanese, like it's very much an art house or an indie thing. There are games where instead of just having the beeping sound when somebody's like when a dialogue balloon pops up, there will be mumbling, or the characters will say like one word and then like like onion.
Something to like intone, and actually I've seen that in I think the first example that jumps to my mind is from my childhood Legend of Zelda games that I played, where sometimes Link would make just a non-committal sound, but it kind of set the tone for how you would read the entire dialogue bubble. Or another character would do that as well, where they'd be like, oh, and then it's like, what, Link, you discovered this in the swamps? Okay, like let's move on this. And it's like, okay, so.
Actually, that's a perfect example, and that's very much an aesthetic. Sorry, Will, I cut you off.
Oh no, you're fine. I was just gonna say it's very similar to like how in the pre-invention of talkies, where you'd have the silent movie characters and they would just kind of gesticulate like and then it'll come up.
They'd over emote. Yeah, exactly. And you have the same thing with video games, and it's for a very similar reason. So like early video games, especially in the 8-bit era, you had a sound card. You had like, this machine is the thing that is processing the sound. So like, and it's always really interesting what comes out of like these limitations, like the Final Fantasy soundtracks on all the games leading up, like the way that they sounded is super localized to them. Anyway, Tangent City. So that got me thinking like, so it's very much an aesthetic, especially with indie games. And it's also like, there's a million reasons you would do this. You can't or don't want to play a full voice cast, but like having that, like just a sound in the background to intonate adds a weight to the words. And you can add that to the way the visuals are presented, like making text bolder or less, like changing a font. There's a lot of things you can do, but the thing that really like got me thinking about this was language. because there's a couple of even in movies as recent as Dune, the way that oh shoot, I'm totally forgetting the Bene Gesserit mom's actor,
Rebecca Ferguson.
The way that Rebecca Ferguson described doing the voice in Dune is she said she would like speak in Donald Duck language, and then like the voiceover would be the thing that would like get it, but it sets a vibe. So that got me thinking about something that I knew that Josh would be well versed in, which is the concept of constructed languages, also known as a conlang. So
I was not aware of that term. I like that. I don't mean to go on a nerd tangent, but I've been fascinated with languages since I was younger. And a couple of years ago, I picked up a great book. It's in my storage unit in California. The exact titles escape me, but it was basically a long format essay analyzing Tolkien's fictional languages in his works and how the story was constructed to serve as a framework for his fictional languages, as opposed to the other way around. Because in pretty much every other work of fiction, the fictional language serves to just complement the story you're telling. Whereas Tolkien, due to his fascination with languages, he actually built up the whole mythos and lore of Middle-earth to be the historical impetus and cultural framework to show how his languages evolved from like the old Sindarin into like the modern Quenya. Yeah, it's fascinating. I read the whole book and I need to read it again. It was great.
All right, so the source that you're talking about is the author is Ruth S. Noel, and there are two of them. There is the mythology of Middle-earth, and there is the languages of Middle-earth. And these are two really big sources, and like this is legitimately a dictionary of everything from Elvish to Orcsy to Halfling.
And the book I have is actually not one of those two. It's upsetting me that I'm forgetting the author's name, but it's there's a whole third thing where it's not even, because there are separate online databases I've looked at for dictionaries and grammar structure, but this book was purely like, here's a history of Tolkien's essays in college and in his work as a professor, and talking about how his philosophy of how languages evolve and what information is needed to inform that extrapolation, and then they correlate it to here's how his notes then correlate to that, building Middle-earth as a functional map of here's how a language and a culture evolves and changes over time. And it was fascinating. I loved it. Yeah,
I think it's a great marker of what can be done when a human being has a focus on something for so long that they forget to have sex for decades.
Yes.
So
it is I don't know if it's been said, but I think Tolkien, he strikes me from what I've read as someone who is possibly neurodivergent in a really brilliant and really intellectual way, because the amount of effort and information and focus he put into his fictional world is just mind-boggling and impressive.
It's very particular in a very big way. And I have to say that I really thought that sentence was going to go in the opposite direction of and again, I agree, but like Tolkien strikes me as somebody who fucks. And the thing is you may have been right. He may have been the most laid professor at Oxford, and we just don't know.
That's going to be the title of this podcast episode: Tolkien, the most fucked professor at Oxford? ?
If you want to get views, like talking about the sex lives of cherished fantasy authors, I think maybe a good that could be a Patreon exclusive. Next week we'll be doing JRR Martin and Patrick Rothfuss, whose beard
we got to talk about C.S. Lewis though, because as a former Christian, I've read C.S. Lewis's nonfiction, and he had some weird thoughts about sex, so we can dive into that rabbit hole if you want.
He was also apparently like my size, which is why the Ents are based off of him.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, Lewis Carroll though,
He probably had a lot. That dude probably fucked a lot.
Yep.
Drug-fueled orgies, man.
If any intellectual properly lived a human existence, I would put money on Lewis Carroll.
I have a couple of thoughts, because Timothy Leary is the obvious option, but if we're talking intellectuals, I have a feeling that there are a couple like of the more intellectual people that either started TV shows. Like I'm dancing around George R.R. Martin. I'm pretty sure George R.R. Martin got laid constantly because he's one of the first nerds. And if there's anything we know about Comic-Cons, it was literally the impetus for nerds getting together to have nerd orgies.
Not only is he a nerd, he's a hippie.
He's a hippie nerd. Like George R.R. Martin.
Conscientious objector to Vietnam. Fuck yeah, my dude.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so
more importantly, you guys are never getting these visuals out of your head.
Nope, never. And I welcome them.
Talking to you, audience.
So now that the audience is thoroughly at least 5 IQ points dumber because of my tangent.
Now that we've started everyone for life.
So backtrack into a segue. So there are technically 3 different. So there are basically, in the breakdown of con languages, there are 3 different kinds. And I had those. I technically knew this before. I have my quick notes up on Wikipedia. Don't at me. There are engineered languages, auxiliary languages, and artistic languages. So engineered languages are logical languages and experimental languages are the 2 subgroups they're broken down to, and they're usually devised for experimentation in logic, philosophy, and linguistics. So if linguistics has to test a theory that involves language, there are certain made-up languages that are specifically for that purpose. Same thing with philosophy and those concepts, and that dates all the way back to ancient Greece.
Really? Wow.
Then there are auxiliary languages, which are they're devised as interlinguistic or international communication. The classic example here is Esperanto. These are languages.
I was about to ask about that. Yeah.
Yep. So Esperanto is like it's the idea is to let's create a language that is a super simple grammar, so that if people go to another country and they don't, like, if I go to if I go to Hungary, because Hungarian is notoriously hard for English speakers, hopefully I'd be able to speak Esperanto and somebody would understand it. And that actually carries through to this day. Like people still go on image boards for that thing. Did
Esperanto ever take? Because from my understanding, it was like devised by a group of like the top linguistics experts, and they devised this international language, and then it never really went anywhere. Can we go on a quick tangent about Esperanto?
I don't know a whole lot about Esperanto anymore. I used to know a little bit about it, but what I do know is that in the modern era, it's still very niche. So the interesting thing about Esperanto is that, like, it does still serve its purpose, and it's actually had a bit of a resurgence because of the internet. Cool. Because you can get in contact with somebody in another country who specifically speaks Esperanto, and you can basically, like, you can go link up with somebody in Spain if you don't speak Spanish, and you can both mutually communicate in Esperanto, and you can translate for him into English, and he can translate for you into Spanish. If you both have a proficient level. So, like, it's one of those very niche things where people can get together and actually do these things. And now we get to my favorite version of these, which is artistic languages. And these are devised to create aesthetic pleasure or for humorous effect. These are what I was talking about with video game languages. Like, it's like sometimes they're actually languages, sometimes they're just gibberish. Sometimes secret languages and mystical languages kind of fall under this category, as in, like, code or like cipher. And without breaking it down into too many more subgroups, the last 2 subgroups are a priori and a posteriori. A priori are the ones I want to focus on, because those are the ones that don't come from another language. They're not derived from English or Finnish or Swahili or any of those. They are constructed entirely to be their own thing. And when it comes down to writing those in fantasy, that means when it comes down to writing those in fantasy, that is creating something that is evocative of a culture by putting thought into it. Like, this is why they would write like this. This is why they would This is why things would look like this.
And that's fascinating because
Tolkien's the prime example of that.
Well, but one could argue that Tolkien's is actually derivative of other cultures that he studied, because he pulled a lot from one of his goals, from what I've read, is that he wanted to do for the UK what kind of mainland Europe had in terms of mythology, and recreate kind of an old world aesthetic. And so he did study a lot of like Gaelic and Celtic, early linguistics, and those were big
old Norse, old English.
Exactly. And those were big influences on his creation of the Elvish languages. And then I've also heard, I haven't read into this as much, that he also constructed the Dwarven language. It's not featured as much in his stories, but it is there. And he based that heavily on Hebrew, and he used Israel's formation and the stories about Israel and the 13 tribes to kind of be a facsimile of the journey of the dwarves being exiled from Erebor and stuff like that. So he kind of had some allegory there. And so I would argue that his languages don't fall into the... I'm trying to think of an example of one that's created from a totally creative impetus. Jump in.
So here's the thing. Like that is really interesting. Everything does derive from something else. That's the way that mythology works. And like the core of what makes an a priori language is that he didn't take wholesale, like while there are pieces, he didn't take wholesale coherent chunks of other languages to make his language.
True.
And because of the way that Tolkien works, he actually like had that, like the whole point of common is actually like, no, common is what I have translated from these historical records of Middle Earth.
Yes.
It's actually this language. Like the way he gets to the idea for Mary's name being Mary is fascinating and like super funny. But like that
Mary Dog Brandybuck.
Yep.
And Peregrine Took.
I might have known.
Yes.
So these sort of languages, like why they are so interesting is because I think they add culture. Like they add culture, they add concept. It's a little bit less hand wavy of like, these people speak English. Like there are other languages, and like the creativity that comes out of people making this shit up is really cool. Including reverse engineering ideas like this.
Yes.
And this might be something that Will might be a little bit more familiar with, especially on the artistic side, is Doctor Who. So in Doctor Who, the Doctor is supposed to be Gallifreyan. He's an alien race that like he's a Time Lord. He's from Gallifrey. The language that you'll see in the more modern stuff is Gallifreyan. It's a circular language with like dots and circles. It's very interesting.
Arrival. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No. Arrival actually is like written by somebody who is very intimately experienced with linguistics, and like we can get to that, or like linguistics and like drawn languages. But the interesting thing about but that was like fully constructed from the author.
Okay.
Gallifreyan, as like set decoration, they made up some glyphs to put on the outside of some Gallifreyan technology. And they are so evocative that people on the internet have actually taken these and they have made a very interestingly complex writing and grammar system that involves like your like some people will go so deep as to like it's the basic mouth sounds as opposed to like vowels and everything. And it's a circular language starting counterclockwise from the bottom, and like this dot means this vowel on this consonant. Double consonants are dropped. Like there's no C sound, there's a K sound. There's some like influence from Greek. But
see, this is the good side of the internet.
Yeah,
there are so many cons to the internet, but there's some positives, and that's one of them. People creating cool shit like that.
Yeah,
you say that, but most of this is used to write fan fiction. So,
guilty as
I
charged.
mean, there are some great works that have come from fan fiction, but then there's also
50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I'm immediately contradicted by my own reality.
I am very.
I got a really quick. I got to remind our viewers that Nathan's official nickname on the podcast is the Terminator from now on.
Yes.
Just
that's right.
Yeah,
I thought
yes.
he was the nerd from the road.
Yeah, nerd on the road, the Terminator.
Nathan, the Terminator Childs. Nathan, the Terminator in that 1 30-second scene of the first Terminator movie, Childs. Okay.
Remind me to circle back to The Expanse, which we had one of the actors from the show on the podcast, Jacob Bundell. He was fantastic. Because they have a language in the books, and then they have a language in the show that are different. And it's their approximation of what it would look like if every nation on Earth suddenly had their populace had access to go into space and work together. What in the books they describe it as kind of a I'm trying to think of the word. I'm drawing a blank now, but
is it pigeon? Pidgin? Pidgin? Pigeon?
Yes, they use that, and they use like patois and a few other terms, but they're basically like, okay, if every language from Earth that is currently being spoken, if people who spoke all those languages suddenly were thrown in a close environment in space where they have to work together, what shorthand language would evolve from that? And so in the show, they made a fictional Belter language where it's, okay, everyone who works on the belt and lives in space stations speaks Belter. And for the people on the show, they took bits and pieces of every language on Earth and made their own fictional language, and it's fucking awesome. But in the books, it's even more complex because every different space station has their own dialect or variation of the Belter patois.
They've got they got their localization, their own vernacular.
Exactly. So like one space station is more German heavy, one's more Mandarin heavy. And so basically anyone who hasn't grown up in the belt, if they're in an environment that's mostly Belters, they're like, I don't know what's being spoken right now. And it's a really cool way of The Expanse, for those who are listening, best sci-fi book series I've ever read. Great sci-fi show on Amazon Prime. Check it out. And follow at Jacob Bundell on Instagram because he's awesome. So that's my Expanse plug right there.
To, like New England and try to like have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, because it'll be wicked hard to have a conversation with those people because like you don't fully understand what the fuck they're talking about. And then they get really pissed off when you say like, oh yeah, this is how a New Yorker talks. Like no, that's from Boston. I know I'm butchering the accent. It's a bad accent. Now you can come fucking at me because every podcast has somebody doing a shitty British accent recently. And as somebody who has even tangentially studied language and like getting accents down, it's like it is hypodermic needles in my ears every time it comes through my earbuds. So please keep doing it to me to get that reaction out of me. Anyway,
our next podcast is going to be filmed from an undisclosed location in witness protection.
With a bag over your head.
Now you can find me.
We will be the Slipknot of podcasts. We will all wear masks.
Oh my god!
It will be amazing.
If that was
if we do a Halloween podcast.
Like we're just doing the fucking head tilt. God.
Yeah. This is why VTubing is a thing.
This is why VTubing is a thing, and now it's too late for all of us because the internet has obviously mapped our faces. But anyway, to roll it back, so this is one of those that's like the big fucking history overview after I dump information on you. What are your all's thoughts and experiences with this? Because I know that back in middle school, when I found out that Tolkien made his own languages, and I specifically read that book on the languages of Middle Earth, and this was also at the same time that Atlantis: The Lost Empire comes out, which is actually on this Wikipedia plane. Atlantean is a posteriori artistic language created by Mark Okrand.
Really?
And I got the Disney magazines for that back in the day, and they had Atlantean translations, and all the stuff you see in the movie is an actual I believe it's a letter for letter cipher of English.
Really?
And it's read specifically in a zigzag down the page.
That's fucking cool.
So
That is
like,
awesome.
dude, it got me thinking about that, because it wasn't just a cipher, like
Mhm.
it was a cipher in such a way that you could speak Atlantean. So I got really nerdy about that, and I would like talk with my friends about like how would you design a language that sounded cool, and like it linked into D&D, and like we could
Hell
just
yeah.
kind of fuck around with it while we were in 8th grade, and like all that fun stuff. Like it was a really cool time,
Mhm.
because like it was a way to flex your creative muscles, because you saw that happen in like big media. So like what are your all's thoughts and experiences with that?
Yeah,
Will, you
as
go
far
first,
as
and I have a follow-up thought.
yeah, well, I was gonna say, as far as it adding something as far as artistically, especially with video games, I think that's always been like a really strong point of world building.
Mhm.
Because I've played way too much Monster Hunter World. And when you play Monster Hunter World with the language setup, you can have the characters speaking English.
Mhm.
Like everything, all of the text is going to be subtitled on screen, regardless of what language you select. Because like they're not saying everything that you need to know. They just say like a couple of words. And so you have subtitles no matter which language you select. And you can select English, you can select Japanese, but you also have the option to select the Monster Hunter language, which is as far as I can tell, a fictional language where they just speak gibberish. I always leave that on because it feels a little bit more like it feels more fantastical.
Like you're experiencing a foreign world,
Yeah, and like
in a way, and totally not like you're listening to people having sex while you're locked in a trunk.
exactly. I think you kind of
Not because they put you there, because you were in the room and you didn't want to make it awkward, so you got in the trunk at the end of their bed, and then that just happened.
Of course, as it does,
as has happened to us and every other human being on the planet.
You know,
Well, I think
sometimes you
you're
just
sorry.
yeah, sometimes you just need somewhere to hide really quick. Like someone comes home early, and not naming names, but it's convenient.
I thought you said it's Midna for a second, and I was about to go off on like the way that Midna is in Legend of Zelda, because that's actually a really interesting take on the Zelda thing. Like, so the Monster Hunter language, like it adds vibe, it adds evocative, it adds evocation. Like take that over to Twilight Princess, and you have Midna, and one of the things they did, like, so Midna is actually voice acted in the game, but the sentences are scrambled purposefully to make it sound more alien. Apparently that was a Shigeru Miyamoto thing.
I thoroughly enjoyed Twilight Princess. I think actually that's the last Legend of Zelda game that I played to completion.
Hey, there you go.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
And it's little things like that, which I do like. I played a little bit of it. I need to actually like buckle down and play it now that I've got a couple game systems. It's things like that that make it interesting. And having seen like Monster Hunter Rise on a couple of these Let's Plays, which are just like addictive to put on in the background when you're doing when you're just drawing or whatever, drawing or writing, not so much writing, but drawing. It adds flavor, it adds character, and that's and you know, in the same way that like when you're reading Tolkien and Elvish pops up, or when you find out that Mordor is actually like a really more like the language of Mordor is this very old dark version of Sindarin. That's a vibe. Like the fact that it looks like old ass calligraphy versus what modern Elvish looks like.
It's a statement under the culture, and it supports the narrative.
Yeah. And Tolkien did such a good job of making a language fit a mood. Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I was 11 and I'm sitting there in the theater and at the fucking Council of Elrond, when Ian fucking McKellen stands up and starts literally spouting exactly. It's like,
I don't have it memorized at all. I'm not a nerd. It's
fricative vowel, fricative vowel, fricative vowel, consonant. Like it's legitimately just like he could have just stood up and made scary ass sounds, but it sounded fucking coherent.
Yes.
and it got across the vibe of Mordor.
Yes. Pair
In a
that
really
with
cool way.
what's his name, Howard Shore's score, and just
and
cinema.
and Viggo Mortensen actually learning Elvish, because Viggo Mortensen is like second only to Christopher Lee, is like
Great
actors
actor.
with amazingly impressive skill sets.
Yes.
You get a contrast out of that, and that is incredibly.
I have to say,
immersive.
he's not the only actor who learned Elvish. Liv Tyler learned it to play Arwen. Craig Parker, who played Haldir, who I met at a Comic-Con, we had a conversation in Elvish back when I was more fluent, and that was one of the highlights of my life. That was very fun. He was very nice, and we had a very brief and simple, but nonetheless cohesive conversation in full Sindarin, and it was great. So that was very fun. Yeah.
How about
that is an impressive skill.
My Govanan Melam. Yeah. I'm no longer fluent. I can still write in it. I write down all my passwords in Elvish. And so if anyone ever finds my D&D notebook, you'll find D&D maps and all my passwords to everything written in Elvish. So
incredible. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's like, when you talk about flavor, like, I think that is the biggest thing, because instead of just having like where everybody just speaks English with an English accent, to be like, and this is our fantasy language.
Yeah. Well, and I was actually talking to our mutual friend Chad Gloria about this yesterday. He just watched the new movie Prey, which I have not seen, but I hear it's excellent.
Oh my god, I'm so fucking excited for that.
Yes, he said literally, he said it was fantastic. He said the only thing he didn't like was that most of the dialogue is in English, and he said if they had just committed and had it all been in Comanche, it would have been fucking epic. And he said watching that movie made him understand why people in Russia didn't like the Chernobyl series, which Chernobyl's in terms of writing, directing, and acting is phenomenal. But the showrunner made the decision to say, I want this to resonate with people at how regular these people were whose lives were affected. So he chose to not have the actors do a Russian accent. He had them speak, and it was a British production, so it was mostly British cast. So everyone had an English accent, and a lot of Russians who watched it, or Ukrainians, they said it threw them off to see this shown with people just speaking in British accents. It didn't fit. And
because
so
it's weird to see British people it's weird to see something that is like, it's your country, it's your setup, but like because the widest audience in the world is English, it speaks English, it's going to be English with translations in other languages.
Correct. And so he said at the time, he said, oh, I totally get why they did that. They want to make it more accessible to English audiences. Cool. But then he said after watching Prey, he's like, oh, now I see how jarring that can be, because he said while he liked Prey, he said the actors were instructed not to do any kind of, to avoid, any kind of, stereotyping or misculturing. They didn't even do accents when they spoke English. They just spoke regular unaccented English. And he said it felt weird to hear someone speaking like they're from the Valley in California. He said it felt like he was watching cosplayers in some scenes, and he said that pulled him out of the movie, which mostly positive reviews that I've heard, and I really want to see the movie, but he said that was his one gripe with it. And so the point I'm trying to make is that language is really critical to how we express ourselves as people, and for storytelling it's so crucial to just make it match the kind of story you want to tell.
It plugs in really well.
I have something to throw at you guys, because there is a series that I've gotten way
to the audience. He actually threw something at me, and it hit me 2 states away. So,
I mean, if I want to hit you with something, it's gonna happen.
He's just over there with the gun at the end of Wanted, like James McAvoy.
You don't know where it's coming from, but it's gonna come.
Okay, so hit me with it.
But so I've really gotten into the series Overlord, which I started watching the anime a couple of years ago. 4th season came. The 4th season was gonna come out, and so I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna read the books, because like it all comes back to these light novels that were originally written, and I've gotten a lot of background. And one of the things that like they don't really make a big deal about this in the anime, but this is a big deal in the show, or in the light novels, is that everyone can, in the world, everyone understands everyone, because there's some sort of magic in the world where any language that you speak is automatically translated to anyone who hears it. And
well,
so
shit, that's what I do in my newest book, which you all are in the campaign for, The Owl and the Eagles, where like the main character comes from Earth to a fantasy world, and the first time he uses magic is when I wrote a fictional language of like gibberish for when he first encounters the characters in the fictional world. They're like speaking gibberish to him, and then he's like feels the magic for the first time, and then suddenly they're speaking English, and he's like, what? And then they're like, we're not speaking English, you just understand us. And he's like, hang on. And so it sounds like I'm not the first to employ this concept.
Well, that's a really interesting trope. I need to remember the name of the series, or I'm going to fucking hate myself.
I gotta say, I'm really proud of my fictional dialogue I wrote for The Owl and the Eagles. Let me pull up that. If you all will indulge me, I would love to read it for you.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
All right. So before you get into your stride, Carey, so speaking of translated languages and stuff like that, there was this book series I got into where basically a guy was, for lack of a better term, he was kidnapped from Earth and he was taken up in a spaceship. And he was a veteran, a military veteran, and he was living in a cabin in the mountains, and he had a spaceship like basically crash land behind his house. And being veteran, he went to go investigate and climbed aboard and basically got abducted. And the pilot, for lack of a better term, of that spacecraft was a basically almost like a human-shaped robot, and he asked him if he could go back, and he said, let me make you an offer and we'll go from there. So he made the offer, and the guy stayed with him for a certain amount of time to go deliver their cargo, and come to find out, it was basically like a slave transport that he was on, but he ended up taking over the ship and kicking that
like Android type alien thing.
Android, basically kicked him off, and the crew, or the cargo, basically became his crew, and they became a crew of mercenaries. The first time they happened upon an alien ship or an alien planet, he stepped out and only knowing English. He was basically well out of his element, and somebody gave him basically like an earphone that was a translator, and anytime anybody spoke around him, it translated what they said into English and whatever he said into their language. And it was like,
which is technology that exists nowadays pretty much.
Yeah,
we can jump down that rabbit hole. There are devices now that where like someone can speak into it in a language, and if it's cohesive, the app will auto detect what language it is and then translate it into whatever language you've selected. I mean, it won't be a perfect translation, but that's fascinating, you know?
Devices right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that if we're going with TV tropes, one of my favorite like websites when it comes down to this, like that's, so the trope is called translator microbes. And that runs the gamut of a device you wear to something that like actually goes in your brain. If I'm not totally wrong, I don't know about the first one, but one of the ones that I like remember as far as the translator microbes go is Farscape, which is a Jim Henson sci-fi property, and dude goes into a wormhole, he ends up on the other side of the universe. And when he first pops out on a ship, he can't understand shit. because everybody's speaking a different language, and he's also, like, being human, he looks exactly like the villain race in this show, or the people that are from this planet that's like very fascistic and trying to like take over the universe.
You mean like some humans are nowadays in real life?
Yep. Man, I wish we had a spaceship. Oh no, wait. Nope. I guess we don't, because they look like penises and are piloted by megalomaniacs. But anyway,
and we're reeling it back.
Sci-fi gets dumb. But anyway, so like the cool thing about that is it is something that is like very much going to present a problem, because if you don't address the language problem, like you can absolutely get away with it. If you're writing one of those 1950s style, like Tales from Beyond, or like Strange Planets or Weird Tales, like right, you can absolutely have somebody land on a planet and be like, hey, what's up there, hot humanoid looking chick? These broads, like, you know, if you really wanted to like go all super misogynistic about it and stuff, that can be something that can be something that you put in, like you can handle that. But if you're going to do a long run sci-fi series, you got to figure out how the fuck someone's going to speak in another language and still like have it coherent English for the audience.
Absolutely.
And you know, some of that is you know, we've talked about like languages that are like portmanteaus and everything, but like
I think have we talked about portmanteaus? What is that?
Or not portmanteaus, like pidgin is what I meant to say.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, pidgin and
portmanteau is where you just compress multiple words into a single word. Like,
yeah.
Like
which guilty as charged as a DM. If I'm trying to come up with, I'll think of what cultures in real life are closest to the culture, the fictional one that I'm DMing for, and I will find two countries with different languages that are similar in culture, and I will look up the word I'm trying to translate, and I will take both the words and I will smash them together, and I'll be like, bam, fictional language. There you go, players. So I do that on the regular, admitting it, guilty as charged. Google Translate is my friend. So.
And it works. And here's the thing, it's all right, one more example, because I'm being a fucking nerd. I think one of the people that like actually played this trope to perfection and did it live and improving, Liam O'Brien in campaign 2 of Critical Role. He plays a wizard named Caleb Widogast, who
that sounds like our friend Caleb Whittle.
You should turn Caleb on to Critical Role, because Caleb Widogast. In addition to Daniel, hang on. Oh shit.
Sorry to interrupt you. I apologize.
No,
our friend Caleb, who's been on the podcast, his last name is Whittle, so his name is Caleb Whittle, and I was like, what?
It's Liam O'Brien. Daniel O'Brien used to write for Cracked and now writes for Last Week Tonight. Liam O'Brien played Vaxel Dan, Caleb Widogast, and now oh shoot, I'm forgetting his name, his character's name in campaign 3. Orem of the Arashari. Okay, right. But anyway, so Liam O'Brien, he's a prolific voice actor. He is also a New York theater nerd. Like, grew up in New Jersey. He's very articulate. He's very intelligent. He's very emotional and evocative. But he just, I don't know if it was a language, I don't know if it's a choice up front, but he decided to start speaking it. He decided to speak in a German accent with his character. And what that became in the lore of Matt versus DM world is because his character is Zemnian. Zemnian is just German. So so Liam, having like a little bit of German behind him, like whenever he speaks in German, he is speaking Zemnian.
And I've actually heard about D&D being used as an educational tool where they'll take like Elvish, and they'll be like, Elvish in this world is Spanish, and they'll have a bilingual group of kids play D&D, and the ones that speak Spanish play characters who speak Elvish, and the ones that speak English play characters who speak Common, and then as they learn, they work together to learn the languages, and it's an educational tool that's been used in schools, and I've read about that on Twitter, and I think that's fucking awesome.
That is one of the fucking coolest things I've ever heard, and I desperately want to be a professor of D&D now for an elementary school.
Right?
That sounds amazing.
We need to stop this podcast and just talk about that for the next 3 hours. But I love that story, and I love how it makes sense. And I think that ties into what Liam did, because he made this as a joke, and then like as a gag, if somebody else can speak Zemnian to him, he just drops the accent and he talks in his normal tenor. So the audience can understand what the fuck he's saying, but now he's talking with like a standard American accent.
Right.
And it was such a good gag that like it just spawned all these jokes because they rolled up a language into the world, which like the way that D&D works. And so like to kind of wrap this up, unfortunately, because I got to get going here in a second.
This is one of our best podcasts. No.
Yeah. Well, it's so like and it is just the barest amount of research
So
and me being a total nerd for this shit. To wrap up my thesis here, language is incredibly important in the way that we present ourselves and in the way that we present a story, the way a story is told, because language barriers, people speaking a language that other people can't. The way the characters interact, the way that you build your world, if you're a writer or if you're a video game producer or something, like language is in some way or another, even down to sign language, is the big conveyor of how two people interact. Like it is getting specific thoughts across in a contrite way that is mutually understood. It is one of the bases for society, and the choices that somebody makes with either inventing a language or using a particular type of language can have very potent effects on the way that people interact with the concept of language in general. And when that's presented positively, and when that's presented as a learning opportunity, you get people that go to conventions and speak Klingon or speak Sindarin. Yes. And that is one of the things that I found so absolutely cool about the concept of like, and all this came from a sheep running a cult that all spoke gibberish.
Yes.
So,
but I'm so glad you mentioned ASL, because I think that's a beautiful language, and I've been seeing it a lot more in movies where they have more characters who speak ASL, and I think that's fucking awesome. And I just want to encourage Hollywood to keep doing that. And I went to dinner with a friend the other night, and we saw two people speaking ASL, and it looked like they were having a pretty heated argument. But I was like, "Rock on, guys!" And then I stopped looking at them because I didn't want to eavesdrop. So,
I mean, that's the thing. It works. Like in the way people communicate is it can be extremely personal. It's also really cool when like in the very base level of sign language that I have, when I can like get a really basic point across with like hi, my name is Carey, like hi, my name's Carey.
Fucking awesome, dude.
Or like
isn't it thank you? Isn't that the
so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and then you're welcome is bringing it back. Okay. And like it's one of those things that you learn. Like if you go look up the Irish polyglot guy, Benny Lewis, he talks about this in his book, Fluent in 30 Days or whatever, Fluent in 3 months. Language brings people together, especially if it's a different language, because no one's, except for the French, is ever going to get mad at you for trying to learn their language. Except for the French, and specifically Parisians, from what I understand. But if and I know I'm speaking quickly and also trying to enunciate, but there is that immediate connection with somebody if you are at least attempting in an honest and non-patronizing way to speak a language with somebody. I have never ever gotten mad at somebody who doesn't speak English coming up to me and making an honest effort to ask me how to get to the bus stop. And like there's something about that I think draws people together in a way that like it's so important to convey in different ways in fiction.
It's almost like offering food to someone. Awesome. It's such a basic necessity of life that like when you connect on that level, it's like a fundamental human connection where you're just like, I see what you're getting at, and we can have a communication now. Like this is great.
You've connected with somebody in like an extremely important way if you attempt to language. Like I mean, hell, that's a plot point in Hawkeye versus Deadpool, the comic. Like you find out. It's brilliantly done. But like, I'm fucking Tangent City. But right before we head off, you find like that's like one of the big comics where like you find out that Clint Barton is deaf.
Because I heard they explored that in the new Hawkeye show, and I haven't seen it yet.
I need to check that out as well. I'm sure Will has done like he's actually seen this part.
Will's
but
like,
he's but like in Deadpool versus Hawkeye, like one of the things that like connects and one of the things that like really grounds Deadpool as a character in this is you find out he speaks ASL. Like he knows ASL. So he starts signing with a deaf person. And it's this like it's one of those things that like and it's done in earnest, it's done well, it's drawn well,
yeah,
and it's done in a way that like this is something that furthers the story because this is a connection that these two characters have that they wouldn't have had if they couldn't communicate, or that like it deepens a communication between them, and it ends up being a good plot point, like I said, not in a patronizing way, but in a way that like furthers the story and it adds humanity to characters.
That's fucking awesome.
And I think that's why language is awesome.
Will, what
anyway, follow me nowhere because I don't have social media.
I think that's a good part to end as any. Of anything that's going to hit as hard as that.
Oh, I want to keep going. I must declare for our audience, this entire podcast, I've been enjoying it and learning, and I am not wearing pants currently. Let's continue.
I have proof.
Oh, there will be the proof is for the Patreon. That's it. Follow us on Patreon, and you can get proof of me sitting here in my boxers doing a podcast. So
we will live stream in various states of undress at some point.
Yes,
and if
there will be dancing, there will be lots of Turkish pop music. It'll be a great time, and yeah.
And if there's enough interest, most of us are still open to the OnlyFans idea.
This is true.
I think it needs to be a joint OnlyFans account, right, Nathan? It needs to be all four of us in unison doing group photo shoots. There's no other options.
Group photo shoots in different places, though, like edited together.
The beauty of Photoshop and green screen is amazing nowadays. I mean, we're good. We're good. We're fine.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful, guys. Thank you. Nathan, thank you for joining us. The Terminator. A reminder to all our audience, follow Will on Instagram and Twitter. Yes, thank you for having us, Nathan. Follow Will at Will Shaw Art if you want awesome artwork, including this right here, courtesy of Will Shaw. Awesomeness. And more to come.
We might have a new cover.
We do have a new cover coming soon. I know. Yet to be revealed.
I don't know if you can say yet.
Ooh, it's still a secret. It hasn't been shared with anyone. It's exciting. But this has been Nerds with Friends, everyone. Thank you so much. This has been great.